I'll be walking you through how to follow these instructions from the Web Single Sign-On with .NET and Windows Azure Active Directory walkthrough to configure a Windows Azure web role, which will be used in conjunction with CRM Online. So make sure you've gone ahead and installed all the prerequisites, Windows Identity Foundation and the SDK, Office 365 PowerShell commandlets, and then I'll basically be walking you through these instructions with a few additional nuances necessary to get this deployed up into a Windows Azure web role. Alright, so we're here in Visual Studio. I've already created a Windows Azure web role project, and I come over here, I'm in CRM Online, so if I also open up the Office 365 admin portal, I have really just one user here, that's me. The account is admin at crmazrsso.onmicrosoft.com. So CRM Online by default now uses Windows Azure Active Directory as its identity provider. And so if you're doing this in an on-prem environment, this would be the same as having Active Directory Federation services deployed and authenticating with CRM using WS Federation and WS Trust. And in fact, Windows Azure Active Directory uses WS Federation and WS Trust just like ADFS does. Alright, so to get started, I'm going to run the Microsoft Online Services module for Windows PowerShell. I'm going to go ahead and follow the example in the walkthrough. So first we're going to import module MS Online extended -force. Next, I'm going to say connect -msol service. Notice this gives me a prompt to enter my credentials. I'm going to enter that admin at crmazrsso.onmicrosoft.com. And so obviously you have to be a Office 365 admin here to do this. I'm going to enter my password. Alright, so we're successful. Now I'm going to set up a new Microsoft Online Service Principal. In the interest of time, I'm going to type all this out and then fast forward the video. And I'm going to change a few things here. I'm just going to change this to CRM SSO.cloudapp.net. And I'll leave this as Federation sample. And we'll just say Azure CRM Online. I'll leave the rest as is. What you'll notice is that I'll get a symmetric key created because one was not supplied. And then I've got a bunch of other information that we're going to want to use later. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this. And we'll drop it in Notepad. Alright, so now we're ready to jump back to Visual Studio. And if I come over to this project, I can just right click. And this is dependent on having the Windows Identity Foundation SDK installed. But I can right click and say add STS reference. Okay, so for the application URI, just like the instructions say, I'm going to type in SPN : and then you need your app principal ID, which is right there. So I'll copy that, paste that, and then the instructions say your directory domain, and so for me that's AZR CRM AZR SSO .onmicrosoft .com. Yours is going to be different, of course. Click next here. Oop, left out that SPN there. Go ahead and ignore this warning for now. We're going to use an existing STS. And I'm going to take the string the instructions give us, so that's down here. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it. Now, of course, what you have to do is you have to come back here, and where it says domain name, you're going to have to enter your domain. Again, mine is CRM Azure SSO.onmicrosoft.com. Click next here. If you want to, you can also test this location. Show all content here, just to prove that it works. And then leave disable certificate chain validation on. Now, obviously in a production environment, you want to enable certificate chain validation. In this case, we're going to select no encryption. Next, through this, click finish. And so the next thing we're going to need to do here is configure this web role under SSL. Right, and we're going to need a certificate. So I'm going to switch over to a blog post that I'll have a link to in my blog post for this video. And I'm going to copy this text. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a self-signed SSL cert for HTTPS on Windows Azure. We're going to end up deploying this to Windows Azure. So let's start up a Visual Studio command prompt. And let's paste this in. Now, for some reason, the copy and paste didn't work, so I'm going to fix these two issues. And then I'm going to delete their test.cloudapp.net, and I want my .cloudapp.net domain that I'm going to use. So I'm going to use CRM Azure SSO.cloudapp.net. Hit enter there. So it succeeded. So basically this is going to be a cert that we're going to use locally as well as deploy to Windows Azure to run the site under SSL. Now what you'll see later on is that we're going to get certificate errors in the browser when we use this certificate because it's not from a trusted authority, but that's okay in development, and I'll show you how to kind of work around that in development. Obviously in production, you'd want to go get a cert from a proper certificate authority, but for now we'll come back to Visual Studio here, come into the certificate section, and notice now that I have that CRM Azure SSO.cloudapp.net. The reason for that is because I told it the make cert tool to put it in my store. So we'll go ahead and select that. We'll just call this cert for HTTPS. So over to endpoint now, we can come back, change this to HTTPS, change that to 443, and select that cert. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to need to do here is come into the web config, and go down to the WS Federation section. Notice that this, just kind of clean this up so we can see it a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and change require HTTPS to true, and then I'm going to add a reply right here, and this needs to be the same reply URL that we created earlier. And so we'll go back over to the Microsoft Online Services module for Windows PowerShell, and I actually didn't create it yet, so let's go do that. So we'll go ahead and do a $reply URL, URL is equal to new dash MSOL service principal addresses dash address, and then that's going to be https CRM Azure SSO dot cloud app.net. So basically we're explicitly telling Windows Azure Active Directory that it's okay to redirect back to this domain with the authentication information, with the claims. Alright, I got something wrong here, so MSOL service principal address. I need another D. And another D there. Okay, that succeeded. So now, we're going to say set MSOL service principal dash app principal ID. We need that app principal ID again, so let's go grab it. Dash addresses. Give it that $reply URL. Okay, so now I can go back to Visual Studio and just punch in reply https CRM Azure SSO.cloud app.net. Okay, we're getting there. All right, so let's switch back to default.aspx. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to drop an ASP literal control. And we're going to give it a name. We'll give an ID of literal1. That's fine. And so let's go to the code behind. And alright, so in the interest of time, I've just gone ahead and pasted this code in. But basically what we're doing now is we're building up a string builder to add to that literal. I've added a reference to Microsoft.identity model. And we're going through and we're getting the claims and dumping them into the page. And of course we need to set that literal. It's going to be equal to our claim dump .toString. Okay. If I try to come out here and say https CRM Azure SSO.cloud app.net, we're going to get a 404 because that doesn't exist yet. I haven't deployed anything to Windows Azure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Fiddler. If you're not a user of Fiddler, you're going to probably want to pause here and go download Fiddler and install it. But most web developers, it's a requisite tool on your desktop. Okay, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to let Fiddler redirect traffic to that domain to my local Azure host. All right, so to do that, I'm going to edit my custom rules, or I'm going to customize my rules, bring up the rule editor here. And if I scroll down here, I want to go to the function called on before request. Okay, there we are. Now we'll come down here, and I'm just going to type begin dash Marcus my customizations. Right. And I'll just put a comment here to remind myself, make requests to https CRM Azure SSO.cloud app.net, redirect to Azure Compute Emulator. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to say if o session dot host dot to lowercase is equal to CRM Azure SSO dot cloud app dot net. Then we're going to set o session dot host equal to, and then to figure this out, we're going to have to do this, right? We're going to have to, let's go ahead and start this up. And it's almost always 127.0.0.1 on 443, but depending on your machine, it may not be 443, it may be another port because you might already have something else bound to 443. But while this is spinning, let's go ahead and type this in, and then 127.0.0.1 colon 443. And let's close that. Go back to our Azure Compute emulator here, it's still spinning up. Yep, so this is 443. That's okay. So verify my rules. Yep, I said 443, so let's save that. Close it. Notice I get my certificate error, that's okay. But let's try this now. Let's say CRM AZ SSO.cloud@.net. Right. Boom, there it is again. So what's going on here is that Fiddler is basically saying, hey, when any browser request or any HTTP request for this domain happens, redirect to the local Azure Compute emulator. So we'll go ahead and continue. And so it's trying to authenticate me to Windows Azure Active Directory. And in fact, because I'm already signed in over here, it's just trying to go through single sign-on. However, I've got a typo. That's okay, let's find that. Let's go back over to Visual Studio. Let's go Alt Debug, stop debugging. So let's fix this. Let's fix my Sts reference. On Microsoft. So let's fix that. Now it's at Microsoft. Yes. Using existing STS. So let me just go ahead and grab that again. So let's copy. Using existing, we'll paste that. So let's go back. Copy that domain so I don't mistype it again. Okay, let's go back to my web config. Probably gonna have to remove that. There we go. So since I ran into some issues, you're kind of learning on the fly on how to debug this and fix some things if you have similar issues. All right, let's find our WS Fed section. Let's go back down here. And let's change that back to true. And just drop that down there so we can read it. Grab our realm so we can read it. Okay, so let's try this again. And this time, I'm actually going to close all these windows. So I actually have to log in again. All right, let's fix this to CRM Azure SSO.cloudapp.net. Go ahead and continue the website. So it's going to ask me to log in. So I'll log in with my onmicrosoft.com account. All right, this is my Windows Azure Active Directory account, and that has to be CRM Azure SSO.onmicrosoft.com. I'll sign in. Boom. I skipped one of the steps on purpose because I wanted to call this out because I ran into this, and it's easy to overlook it when you're going through the walkthrough. It does tell you that what you have to do is go into your web config, and we'll find system.web. Okay. And under system.web, you have to turn request validation mode to 2.0. Now, if we run this, and we go through authentication again, what you'll see is you'll no longer get that request validation error. So we'll go to So you'll get one more error, and this is something that isn't explained in the instructions. And so it's, again, one of these little nuances that is the reason that I created this video. So if you go back over to Visual Studio and you do a Control F on Audience URIs, just go ahead and delete the @crmazrsso.onmicrosoft.com part. Run it again. All right. So this time, if all worked, we should have success. Boom. So there we are. And those are all the claims that have been sent back. So now what about getting it set up in Windows Azure? We actually want to deploy this, right? Well, there's a couple things we're going to have to do. So I'll go ahead and get this going. So the first thing we're going to need to do is come in here and take our reference to Microsoft.identity model and set copy local to true, because Windows Identity Foundation is not deployed to Windows Azure Web Roles by default. So that's the first step. The next thing we're going to do here is we're going to come in and we're going to add a new item. Just call it a text file. And I'm going to rename this text file to register with gac.cmd. Now, again, I learned this the hard way, but hopefully you won't have to learn it the hard way if you've come across this video. So I'm just going to put a little command in here, and I'm going to say if % emulated % equals true, go to end of file. However, if we're not in the emulator, what we want to do is we want to say gacutil /i /no logo /i Microsoft.identity model.dll, then exit /b0. Okay, now once we've done that, then we have to go into our CSDef file and create a startup task here. So we'll go ahead and start up task register with yak.cmd. I want the execution context to be equal to elevated, and the task type is going to be simple. And then we're going to add an environment variable here. And then we're just going to type role instance value xpath equals / role environment deployment / at emulated. Okay, so let's pause here and regroup. And what did we do? We made sure that the Windows Identity Foundation DLL gets deployed as part of the package. Then we wrote a little command file that will be used in a startup task to deploy Microsoft.IdentityModel.dll to the global assembly cache in the Windows Azure web role. We configured that startup command and set up that variable so we can ignore when we're in emulator mode, when we're running in the Windows Azure compute. And the other thing that we've got to do is we've actually got to add gakutil to the project. So we'll say add existing item. All right, so that's at C, program files, Microsoft SDKs, Windows. It was 7.0 bin. We'll find gakutil. Add that. Of course, we'll copy this. I'll not copy this, but we'll set its properties so that it does copy on build. Let's build that. Okay, so we got a build error. Let's take a look at that. It's in our CSDef file. Let's see what we got wrong here. Oh, I got a little typo there. Try it again. Build succeeded. Alright, so we can now publish to Windows Azure. And I've already set up my Azure service and all that good stuff. I'm assuming you know how to do that. I'll click publish. Notice the publish succeeded, but the actual deployment failed with errors. Why is that? Well, if you go to your Azure portal, you have to upload that certificate for SSO. So to do that, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to type MMC, grab that certificate that we created earlier over here using make cert. So I'm going to grab certificates. This was a computer account certificate. So let's go local computer. Boom. There it is. So let's export this. Say yes, export the private key. We want it to be a PFX file. We'll give it a password. Click next. We'll just put it here on the desktop and we'll call it CRM Azure SSO.cloudapp.net.pfx. Okay, so now we can upload the certificate. grab it, put our password in, okay, so now we have a certificate. We should be able to come up here now and publish this. And it is in fact publishing. Okay, so I cut out the wait time for this to publish to Azure, but now it's published and complete. And so I can come up here and I can go to HTTPS CRM Azure SSO.cloudapp.net. We'll go ahead and continue to the website. Admin at crmazrsso.onmicrosoft.com. Admin. Logged me in, and there we go. And so notice that Fiddler's not running, and this is actually running in Windows Azure now. And we just logged in to this ASP.NET website using my Windows Azure Active Directory account with my CRM Azure SSO.onmicrosoft.com domain. And so now how do you get single sign-on? Well, that's the great part. I'm already logged in. If I go to CRM Azure SSO.crm.dynamics.com, what's going to happen is I haven't, in this browser session, logged in to that site yet, but because this is configured for SSO, CRM sends me back to Windows Azure Active Directory. Windows Azure Active Directory said, this guy's already logged in. Here you go. Here's his claims for CRM Online. And then it redirects me back to CRM Online and lets me in. So that's single sign-on. And of course, it works the other way around. So if I go to CRM Azure SSO.crm.dynamics.com, and I log in as admin at crm.azrsso.onmicrosoft.com. I'm logged into CRM. Come over here and I say CRM AZO HTTPS CRM Azure SSO.cloudapp.net. I'm allowed single sign-on. Of course, I get the security certificate error, but I'm going to go ahead and continue, and boom. So let's actually just do that one last thing, and you can do this in development as well. You could have done this earlier on. I could have done this earlier on in the video, but what I'm going to do is say view certificates, install, next. Select trusted root certificate authorities here. Click OK, next, finished. It's going to give me this scary little warning. Of course, I'm doing this on my development box. I'm not encouraging you to trust self-signed certificates elsewhere. It's just so that you don't have to, on your dev box, have to see the big scary red message every time. Say OK. Now this time, if we do it again, there's no warning about the certificate because my machine now trusts it. Boom, there I am, no scariness. And I can also go CRM Azure SSO.crm.dynamics.com. Oops. CRM Azure SSO.crm.dynamics.com. And I got my single sign-on across both properties.